Our good news, the gospel, tonight comes from Matthew, the 9th chapter. As Jesus went from there, he saw a man named Matthew sitting at the tax collector's booth. "Follow me," he told him. And Matthew got up and followed him. While Jesus was having dinner at Matthew's house, many tax collectors and sinners came and ate with him and with his disciples. When the Pharisees saw this, they asked his disciples, "Why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners?" On hearing this, Jesus said, "It is not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. But go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice, for I have not come to call the righteous, but the sinners." The good news, the gospel of our Lord.
Walk tall and carry a big stick. That's what my Abba always told me when I was growing up. I don't really need the stick for walking, but when you work with money, you always got to be ready to defend yourself. Out of all the disciples that Jesus of Nazareth gathered around him, I had to be the most unlikely. If you had been put in charge of gathering disciples, students for this teacher, Jesus, you would not have picked me. Heck, I wouldn't have picked me. You want to know why? Here's kind of how people thought about me in my day. Use your imaginations for a second. You're home at the end of a long day. You're tired and you're just sitting down to eat supper, and there's a knock on your door. And you go down and there's a stranger standing at the door, and you're immediately irritated because this dude is interrupting your dinner. And the stranger says to you after pulling the credentials out of his pocket and flipping it open, "Hi, I'm from the IRS. I would like to speak to you for a little bit." Immediately you're filled with anxiety, right? You start thinking, "Oh my gosh, did I do something wrong? Did I make a mistake on my forms? Did I cheat the government? Are they here to arrest me?" And you're filled with a lot of anxiety and angst, and it ruins your whole evening. Well, multiply that feeling by 10, and you get a sense of how my fellow Jews thought about me. Matthew, a tax collector. See, they all labeled me a thief and a traitor because, I was a Jew, but I was hired by the Romans, our oppressive governors, to collect the taxes. And yeah, sure, the righteous Jews, they were happy to pay a tax to the temple or to support Jerusalem or to take care of their wealthy families. But when it came to paying their hard-earned money to the government, to support their military and to support their oppression of us, they resented the heck out of that. And they blamed me. And some of my countrymen, some of my fellow Jews, they were a bit feisty about it. In fact, every so often, about every other Friday night, they'd get a group together and they would go up to the Antonia fortress where Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor, would hang out. And they would stand out in the street outside of his residence, and they would start chanting this song. "Pontius Pilate, oh baby, let my people go. Ooh, yeah, 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 yeah. Pontius Pilate, oh baby, let my people go. Ooh, yeah, 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 yeah." Well, Pontius Pilate didn't think much of that. Kind of irritated him a little bit. And he was kind of feisty himself too. But the truth is, I was a little bit more like a customs agent. See, under the law, I could stop anybody who was bringing their stuff to market and exact a tax or a toll on them. Somebody's coming from their farm into the market, I could tax them for using the highway. I could tax them for using the roadway. If somebody was crossing a bridge, I could stop them and make them pay a tax for the bridge. Heck, under the law, I could charge somebody a tax for breathing the same air as me. In fact, the Romans loved it because I always had to give a portion of that tax to the Romans. But see, the perception was that I was always overcharging people and putting all that extra money in my pocket. And sure, when I got into the tax collection business, I thought it was a way to make a quick buck. I thought it was a way to get ahead in the world, feed my family and such. But what I found out is that a lot of people did not cooperate with me. It was not a get-rich scheme, believe me or not. I got beat up more than a few times trying to exact a toll on somebody or to collect a tax. It was a hard way of life. And believe me, it did not make me wealthy. But the perception of my fellow Jews was that I was a traitor and that I was a thief. And I got to tell you, I didn't feel like a thief because I was just trying to make an earning to feed my family. And I didn't feel like a traitor because I was doing something to try to keep peace in the culture. Somebody had to collect the taxes. That's what my fellow tax collectors and I used to tell each other, told ourselves. We kind of salved our consciences. Somebody's got to do it. Might as well be us. But it wasn't what I originally thought it was. And I got to be honest with you, the hardest thing, the loneliest part was the way my fellow Jews talked about me. The fact that they judged me, the fact that they labeled me, the fact that they wouldn't have anything to do with me. I was lonely. I was excluded. I wasn't invited to prayer. I wasn't invited to parties. I was left out of a lot. And you know what? There wasn't enough wine in the world at the end of the day to take away that loneliness. I spent a lot of time thinking, I've got what I want in the world. I've got all the material things. But I am so unhappy. I am so unfulfilled. I was hungering for something meaningful in my life. I was hungering for relationships that mattered. You know, I heard about this young rabbi who was making his way around the countryside in northern Israel. Some people were saying he was a magician, like he could do really extraordinary things. And some people were saying he was this extraordinary healer, like he could cast out demons. Some people were saying he was a maniac, that he was out of control, he was a zealot, that he was just out for violence and to overthrow the Romans. I mean, people had all sorts of opinions about this Jesus of Nazareth. I didn't quite know what to think about him. But then one day I was sitting at my table and I was arguing with this widow about a tax that she needed to pay on the quilts that she was bringing to market to sell. And she was arguing with me, giving me the same old thing I've heard 100 times. I don't have the money to pay it. I'm absolutely broke. I don't have it yet. What are you going to do? You're going to squeeze it out of me. I had heard it so many times. I was just sitting there with my arms folded. Well, sure enough, here comes this young rabbi, Jesus, out of the crowd. And he walks over to my table, and he looks at me. I couldn't make eye contact with him because he had these eyes, these piercing eyes that went right into my soul. It was like he was reading my soul, and I couldn't look at him. He didn't say a word to me. He just took a coin out of his pocket, he put it down on my table, smiled at me, and walked away. And this woman who I'd been arguing with was thanking him profusely, and she turned around and started to go after him out of the crowd. And I just watched her toddle away and put the money in my bank. Felt pretty grateful for the exchange. But then it happened. I'll never forget this. A couple days later, I'm sitting at my table, and I've been thinking about all the profit I was going to make for the day, how I was going to maybe have a special meal that night, and sure enough, here comes that young rabbi out of the crowd, this Jesus. He's walking towards my table, and immediately I'm nervous. That's why my heart's going really fast, and I got sweaty palms. I'm the one who usually makes people nervous. And I'm getting nervous as Jesus is approaching me, and he walks up to my table, and I'm trying to think of what I'm going to say to him. And I finally look at him, and I say, what do you have to declare today? And then I quick look away. And he just shakes his head and smiles at me and looks at me with those eyes. He says, Matthew, that was my name. Matthew, follow me. That was what he had to declare that day. It was an invitation for me to follow. And I cannot explain to you what happened to me at that point. But my body physically started to stand up out of my chair. And I started to walk away. And that day, because Jesus declared to me the invitation, come follow me, I was so hungry. I was so lonely. I wanted what he had, what was in his eyes. And I left my table. I left my money. I left my job. I left my security right there that day. And I started to follow Jesus through the marketplace. And he turned at one point and he said, Matthew, I want to come to your house for supper tonight. And invite some of your friends. I was like, this is awesome. I haven't had a guest in my house in so long. So I ran home and I told my wife, and we got our supper ready and we showed up. And my friends started to arrive, and Jesus came to the house. And even before he came in the door, he said, Matthew, let's pray evening prayer together. Wow. I hadn't prayed with anybody in so long. I hadn't had anybody ask me to pray with them in so long. It was like another one of those lightning bolts right into my heart. I said, absolutely, Jesus, let's pray. And we did. And then we went into the house for the meal. And it was an awesome experience. Jesus treated me and my friends like we were just regular people. He didn't treat us like we were marginalized, like we were sinners. He didn't treat us like we were thieves, like we were lower than him. He didn't judge us. He didn't label us. He got us laughing. We had fun together. He treated us with dignity, like we were as good as he was. He saw something in me that night that I couldn't even see in myself. And all I knew when he left my house that night was that I wanted to be with him. I wanted to be one of his disciples, one of his students. I wanted to learn from him. I wanted what he had. And I walked with him for several years through the lands. And if you read my good news that I wrote, this story called the Gospel of Matthew, my name's on it. You can read it. I have in there all sorts of stories about Jesus healing people and Jesus teaching and calling the marginalized together and blessing people and casting out demons. And he always acted compassionately. He would put his hand on people and their lives would be changed. And he reminded me of Moses. He was like a new Moses. He was freeing people from what held them captive. He had freed me just by looking at me, just by treating me with dignity. He was a new Moses, freeing us as a people. And I wrote about it. Is Jesus coming to you tonight? Is he walking up to you right now, looking in your eyes, speaking your name, and inviting you to follow him? To follow him closely in a new way, to listen and watch and learn and change? I hope and pray that you will say yes when Jesus invites you to follow him, because it will make all of the difference in your life. It will change everything in your life. It did in me. It's made all the difference in me. Say yes to the one who will change your life.